Good morning. It's Monday, March 16th, 2020, 9 a.m. This is the Muscatine County Board of Supervisors. I'd like to call the meeting to order. First item on the agenda is to review the agenda.
Move to approve.
Second.
I have a motion by Santos, second by Scott. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carries. Item number 3 is to receive comments from the public. Is there anyone here wishing to address the board on an issue not currently listed on the agenda? If so, step to the podium, state your name and issue. Seeing no one come forward, we'll move on to item number 4. Item number 4 is a public hearing on the proposed FY 2021 Muscatine County budget. So we're now in a public hearing, so anybody wish to provide comments on the published budget, feel free to do so at this time. Jim?
You don't want to hear. Don't start.
Okay. Yeah, Henry, please step to the podium.
Good morning, Henry Markford, 108 Eagle Watch Road, Muscatine. I will, when you get to item 12, will like to address the board. But I just have the budget, I just have a question. And that is the county board prepared if it's necessary to increase services related to COVID-19 regarding their public health, law enforcement, or anything like that? Do you have reserve funds or some plan in place in case the county board has to, increase services in any of those areas?
Yeah, I think that as a general rule, we do have some reserve funds and we would have the authorizations and the ability to do something if this situation required it.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay. Anything else on the public hearing on the budget? If not, I would accept the motion.
Move to close the public hearing.
So I have a motion to close the public hearing by Scott,
Second.
second by Santos. This is a roll call vote. Santos?
Aye.
Doug?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
I vote aye. So the public hearing on the 2021 budget is now closed. Item number 4A is discussion of possible action to approve resolution 03-16-2001, approval of elected officials fiscal year 2021 salaries. It should have been in your packet.
Right. Move to approve.
I have a motion by Scott,
Second.
second by Santos. Any discussion? This is a roll call vote. Doug?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
I vote aye. Santos?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Item B is resolution 03-16-2002, adopting a fiscal year 2020-21 county budget.
Move to approve.
So I have a motion by Scott.
So I'd like to have a discussion on this as well.
Okay, so are you gonna second? No
We'll see. Yep.
discussion?
Yep.
So I have a second by Santos. Okay, now we're open for discussion.
So we had multiple requests in regards to the potential of amending or looking at the Special Olympics in this budget review.
Yep.
We had had a lot of the public input in regards to this, and then discussions that I have had with Felicia and looking at the budget and looking at potential ways we can come up with funding for the Special Olympics, knowing that we had completely cut that funding. And so I would like to see if there was a discussion view or if there's a way we can come up with funding $20,000 for that budget, looking at knowing that we would have to remove funding from existing potential programs or organizations that we've already given that to. My particular view is looking at funding from MCSA and taking $20,000 from that program and putting it into the funding for the Special Olympics.
Okay.
And one of the discussions that I'd had from that personal view was looking at the case manager that we currently fund, that my understanding was put in place with Mike Johansson back in his time for the MCSA. I also, it is my understanding that we hired that case manager last week at our review here. That is now our receptionist. And so I believe that it would be a good view from my perspective as far as funding to come up with, giving that funding 20,000, and then looking at MCSA to remove that funding from them, and then have a discussion with them on what other options we could do to help them in the future and in the upcoming year, as knowing that the challenges that we're gonna have with continuing funding with MCSA. But my perspective is I would like to request an amendment for that, and I would look for discussions and potential action on that.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting topic of, I think next week after, actually Felicia has had a recommendation. You know, one of the things we've done is, I'll call it grant funding of positions and stuff in the past. And we're moving to more contracts for services, kind of budget authorizations rather than just buying positions. And that's a discussion that we're planning to have on the board here in the next, I think April 6th meeting was, we were gonna put that on the agenda for discussion on the board on direction. So, and I know in the mental health region that, you know, Felicia and I are going to a budget session today, the peer drop-in center, and a number of things that are supported out of the mental health budget are gonna be up for discussion today. So I think there's a lot of moving parts around that, so. So you're thinking to reduce that funding by 20,000?
Correct.
And then allocate it to the Special Olympics funding?
And then next year, we'll have a discussion. I just feel that it's important and needed service, knowing that what Special Olympics provides for our public and our community.
Okay.
Is this something that, that you, wanna do yearly?
I think that we would, I know we cut that funding, and knowing that the 30 to 20 was a discussion that we had made from Felicia's recommendation initially in our budget review. And I think that her recommendation was looking at next year's funding, cutting it to 10. And I think that's something that the board will have a discussion, obviously looking at knowing how much our mental health is changing and evolving. I think that will be a discussion that honestly we will have to have at budget. I would continue to believe that at that time, I would look for Felicia's guidance and see what kind of funding she would discuss and provide for us. And if it turns out that she says, hey, a recommendation of 10 or 15 or
Yeah, I
none,
think
that's what we're gonna have to look at. I really have to continue to get my insight from Felicia at this time, and my thoughts and input from the public and from Felicia's recommendation initially was to cut that to 20. And again, to help with knowing how much I've gotten feedback from the public, knowing that that is a piece that I feel that we can still, budget-wise, still make work. I think that's what I'd like to do, Scott. So I think it's too difficult, to be honest with you, to say that I'd want to do that next year. I think that we would have to go off the guidance from Felicia at that time.
Yeah, I think there's a lot up in the air. If you look at the legislation, and
Yep.
it appears like right now that it might go through the governor's proposal to move, to cap the counties at a much lower levy rate than we are today. That's the debate right now for mental health funding and funding in all of these areas. And then the state will take over the bulk of the dollars. They'll backfill that with, they're talking about sales tax dollars or something else. So it'll be property tax relief for the local property taxpayer, but they're hoping to try to get additional funding into the mental health system. So I think that's likely to, I doubt it's not gonna go for this budget, but probably the next budget year, we're gonna see something there.
And I think that's, once we know that information, Scott, then we can obviously say, hey, we're gonna be limited to 7,500 or something to that effect. Or I really have to say that I know it probably may get cut again, but I still think that it's our responsibility, knowing that we have already committed those dollars in the past. They've continued to look at the budget, knowing the amount of funding and impact that it has in the community for the small investment that we make. I think there's a lot of return that we get out of that. So I feel that it would be good for us to be able to look at way of funding that with another 20,000 and moving that at MCSA. And I think that's in my understanding. I think it's in Fund 2 right now.
I like that idea because it gives them an opportunity to figure out fundraising instead of just throwing it on right.
And I think I share the input of what I got from the meeting that I had with Brett, and the information I got with Jason, how much they do from travel, how much they go to different events, how many communities / city residents and county residents that are involved in these programs, and knowing that they're very good with their funding. They obviously are doing very good things with their dollars, knowing that they go to all these events and that's all funded through just a piece of what we supply or provide for them.
Any more discussion? So do you,
I think there needs, the impact of cutting back the case coordinator at MCSA needs to be explained. If you're thinking about considering that, there's an impact to cutting that position.
yeah, I don't know where that position, that falls under,
Felicia can explain that better than I can.
Yeah.
There is an impact to the county with that.
I think you're fine with that.
I was working on a performance contract, and part of that performance contract was to trying to lower our expenses in the shelter arena. And the only way to lower our expenses in the shelter arena is to use that case manager to be able to move those people to rehousing much more quickly than they are now, as it stands. And so the budget amount I had was $36,713. So as you cut that back, the case coordination is going to go down, and so the shelter expense is going to go up. So there's a balancing act that's gonna go on there. So we're gonna have people in that shelter longer than we do now, and so that's gonna be an expense that the county's gonna pick up. So you're going to be lowering one and raising another, just so you know that.
When we have the case manager, technically in a sense, we have their case manager now. Is that not my understanding?
We hired the case manager as a receptionist.
Correct.
Yes, so
Okay.
MCSA has got to figure out what they're going to do in terms of that case management piece, even now, because that's also still in the budget for 27,000. So you're talking about lowering it lower than it is now. So,
So is their case manager paid 27,000 or 35?
it's,
35,000 or 36,000 is the way I thought I read through that.
the salary is $15.82 an hour, and then their benefits on top of that, and it's my understanding that they cut their benefits. Cut their medical, so there's still the FICA and all the things that go along with that, it's in addition to that hourly salary, but.
Right now, they don't have that case manager, is my understanding, correct?
No.
Yeah.
I think the case manager, if I recall, was put in there a number of years ago, because if you look at the code, I believe that, the county shall provide for homeless housing, so that's a shall provide, so we have no option, but if somebody becomes homeless in Muscatine County, we must provide housing for them, short term. And I think what Mike had done a number of years ago in MCSA, they'd seen where we'd had a lot of people coming in and out of homeless shelters. And so what they tried to do was put a case manager position in there to work with those people to kind of avoid the constant crisis it was putting families through. And I think that the program has had success. We've had some pretty good successes. I think we've had a couple people come here. So I think that's the question. And I don't have off the top of my head, and I'm trying to figure out where that would be in the budget, what we're spending for shelter services as well.
It's in Fund 1, for FY '21, we're talking about 127,000, let me get the exact number.
127,150.
Yep,
And then we're paying another 25,000 for the case manager, or 27,000.
this year.
Okay,
We raised it for FY '21 to 36,000.
yeah.
Does anybody know how much the city gives towards MCSA?
I have no idea.
I believe it's 25,000 or something to that effect.
And do you all know, does Loiza County and Cedar County also contribute to Special Olympics? I don't know how many folks from Cedar and Loiza County are part of the group that's getting paid for.
So,
Small percentage for Special Olympics. We have probably 10 to 15 that are outside of Muscatine County, as compared to, over 173 that's majority of our athletes from Muscatine County. But nobody pays anything to be in Special Olympics. There's no charge.
No, she's asking to Cedar and Eliza County help fund the program for their people.
As far as county tax dollars,
Yes.
or
Yes.
not that I know of. No.
yeah. So if we were to, again, we don't know what the, you're saying 127, we could cut from the housing and potentially cut from the case manager to break that 20. We could cut 10 from the housing, and we could cut 10 from the case manager. And I understand that it
You
is,
can certainly do it that way. Whether or not MCSA runs out of money in May
yeah.
is hard to tell.
And, yeah, I think I would be more open to that, knowing that they don't even have that filled position, so they're still gonna have cost coming in, or maybe more up on that, and we're still having our case manager that can, or our receptionist that could help in some of those review of those numbers as well, too. I would like to look at it from that perspective if we could. I still wanna give them 20,000 if we can this year.
What's the long game? Is the long game to be funded privately? Is that the long game on this?
I think that's the discussion that Felicia's given us, that we can kind of come up away with trying to help them be more, sustainable, either from the community input or more fundraising that they may look at. And I think that the community has spoken a lot in regards to trying to come up with fundraisers, and I think the sheriff has as well too. So I appreciate all of that, and I think that, I truly believe that, Nathan not being here and knowing how much Jeff is involved in the mental health, I know that it is a good program. When you think about, what Special Olympics does, the input that we got, I mean, it is mentally challenged individuals that are performing at a high level of work that they do, and I think that it in a sense, it does align in some senses, but it is a community involved, piece that I think that we get a lot of value out of. I really do.
So just try to understand the proposal. So you would direct staff to remove $20,000 from the shelter and case manager budget line items to fund Special Olympics?
Yes.
That's the proposal.
Yep.
Well, I'm gonna just ask you directly, Felicia. Does that proposal make any sense to you? I know that's a tough question. I'm gonna put you on the spot.
Very fine. I'm concerned because MCSA has had a ramp up of the population that they've had in there. In the last 2 months, they've had more than 5 families in the family shelter, multiple kids, that sort of thing. And I'm afraid they're gonna wind up in a position where we can't fund anymore. And so, what do we do then if they don't have that kind of funding? If I were gonna pick and choose, if you're asking me to pick and choose, I would say, I would say take it out of DHS's budget.
Or you added a portion of a diabetes case coordinator to the Board of Health that's new for next year.
Say that again, please.
The,
Added to the Board of Health, to the Trinity, I don't know what they're called now.
Unity Point.
Unity Point Public Health Department, you added
how much was that? No, that was,
27,000
yeah, that was-
for a new position for next year. Would be, you know, those are the areas that you can take it from. You can't take it from any of the other areas. It needs to be from that service area 3, because of where we're at in the budget process. So I think our point is, it doesn't have to be from the shelter if you decide to reduce someone.
Yeah, well, the reality is that, the code says we shall fund shelter. So even if the shelter runs out, we wind up with homeless, we have to deal with it. We have to find other sources, which means there are other essential services we will probably, because there are things in code that we fund that says may, and we would have to eliminate those activities and fund the shalls, if I recall.
so yeah, that's what I'd like to know where that is. I guess I was reviewing the code and I don't remember seeing where it says that we shall provide housing for the homeless. I guess I think it was
We shall provide a homeless shelter, I believe it
a
says.
homeless shelter, okay.
Well, and in taking a look at that is how we came to some of the cuts that were made, Special Olympics being one of those, is taking a look at funding the things that we need to pay for, and not funding the things that we aren't required to pay for, is how we got here. I think everybody thinks Special Olympics is an excellent program.
And
And we don't want that misunderstood at all.
And my perspective, I think we're all trying to look at ways of funding it. My perspective is, it's just, I feel that when we first cut that, I feel like we just threw them right out of the plane and said, hey, you don't have no parachute, and go ahead and land. I think I would rather look at a way of giving them some sort of parachute, in a sense, knowing that we're gonna get on a soft landing, knowing that maybe next year we may be completely cut. I don't know. That's a discussion that I think Felicia will have to give us then. But from this perspective, I would like to have a way we can come up with funding. And if it turns out we cut 5, 5, and 5 from something, I'm okay with that. But I'd like to
What's the
come up with a
DHS
way of
budget
coming up with
total?
that.
$70,400, I believe.
And that's primarily, that's all the support we give for the income maintenance workers and all of those.
It's all the daily operational expenses.
And that we are required to pay for, so if that would run over budget, we're gonna have to come up
It would be
with it somewhere.
a mirage.
And that's out of fund what right now?
This is
Fund
all
one.
Fund 1 that is DHS?
Mhm.
Okay.
Fund 1 is the general.
General
assist-
basic
the general
services,
assistance, right. The Unity Point is also Fund 1, Service Area 3. And that's where we funded Special Olympics, which we will, if you do approve funding, we will move that to non-departmental and pull it out of general assistance, because it doesn't fit with,
The current
rules
system, yep.
For general assistance.
Yeah. I'm open to doing that if we need to do that, if that's the recommendation that Felicia has. We would cut it out of DHS, 20,000.
Well, I think maybe what I might offer a suggestion is maybe we look to we go for 20,000, we pull 10 from DHS, and we pull 10 out of the diabetes care coordinator position for public health. That doesn't completely eliminate that funding, it still allows that activity to continue. It's not what she requested, but, and I know Nathan was pretty passionate
I know
about
he was, and I know he'd
what that
be
has done for the
discussing that right
community,
now.
so, but that might be a more, workable, I would say, situation.
Do you want a second for that motion?
Am I making the motion? How do you wanna make the motion? I don't care. Sure, I'd make the motion that we direct staff to reduce the DHS budget by 10,000, Trinity, the public health by 10,000, use that $20,000 to fund, Special Olympics.
I would second that motion.
Okay, we have further discussion?
No, thank you.
Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I,
Opposed the same, motion carries. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, still have the resolution.
Yeah,
Oh,
he's still-
I'm sorry, that should have been a roll call vote, I'm sorry. So this needs to be a roll call. We have the resolution on the floor for adopting the fiscal 2021 budget still. We were in discussion. So any further discussion on that?
No, I just appreciate time with staff and
We
sharing
had
all
the-
their input.
I think we had a motion and a second, right? We had, okay, so this is a roll call vote. Anything else on the budget?
I do think if there's gonna be more discussion about whether this is ongoing funding or if we're reducing this back each year, that decision needs to be talked about, so the group knows what to plan on,
Right.
you know.
Yeah, I think that, you know, I think in our last conversation, we talk about the budget process. We need to probably be getting out with groups that have had funding in the past and how the process works and when we have those and engage in those discussions, which is, we typically start that January 1st, basically, but prior to that, it's December is when we start going out to agencies and saying, what are your needs and what are the situations?
When do you guys do your budgets?
We're on a calendar year, so we goes in the fall.
Yeah, so we need to.
You do,
know in
you
the
calendar
fall
year, so you do
Yeah.
like an October timeframe,
Whether
when you're
they
setting your
expect
budget.
the 20,000 or whether that's gonna be reduced.
All right, so I have the resolution still open, we need to do the roll call vote. We had the motion and second on it, correct, Leslie? So I just need to roll call it, so this would be adopting the budget as amended, correct? Okay.
Aye.
Santos?
Yeah, aye.
I vote aye, Scott?
I,
Doug?
Aye.
All right, we're through it. All right, good.
And I think just to Sherry's point, I think when we will look at it, and I think when Felicia starts providing us that, starting in the middle of the year, if we can start letting them know in July, you know, or in August, hey, we're looking at that, I think that gives them plenty of time to already know that there's, just with this discussion, I believe there's probably a strong possibility that this upcoming year, we may not be able to fund them. So I think that's, we'll look at it, we'll see how things,
There was discussion at one point that it be dropped back by 10,000 and then 10,000 and then zero.
Yeah.
That's what we're thinking. If they know that now, that'll help them.
And I've had numerous discussions with community members and I think this isn't, you know, we'll be able to get through this and Special Olympics is a valued, program in the community and the community will support it. We just need to get the process figured out and I feel good about that. I've had a number of calls basically saying the same thing, so.
yeah, I have to.
Okay. All right, let's move to item number 5 is a public hearing on the proposed amendments to the FY 19 and 20 Muscatine County budget. Sherry, did you want to run through those just quickly?
I think unless anyone has specific questions about the detail of it, I'm gonna talk about the fund balance. With this budget amendment, mainly due to federal inmate revenue, it increases our general fund balance by $526,593. General supplemental is reduced by $19,871. That is because we chose to move trust and pay services from mental health fund to the general fund, and this covers the benefits from when we did that to the end of the fiscal year. It's money we have in fund balance.
And this is current year
This is current year.
impact, current budget
Yes.
impact, and in the future, in the 21 budget, we have it budgeted accordingly.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yep. Rural services reduced $3,300. Capital projects, fund balance reduced by $2,725,549. All these, as you go down the list, like for capital projects, it's the timing of projects. We're spending money that we have in the fund balance because of when projects get off the ground. Some of these are, you know, we have it with secondary roads, we have it with our capital projects. When we budget, we assume we're gonna write the checks in this fiscal year. Then if that doesn't happen, we're writing it in the next fiscal year, so we aren't, I wanna make it clear, we're not spending money we don't have, we're spending money we have for these purposes, it's just a matter of timing.
Right.
The same with historic preservation, reducing $5,000, that is for the architectural services to do the study on the historic jail. They have the money in their fund to pay for this. We've just paid for it this year, when we thought maybe it would not happen until next year. So, sheriff forfeiture will increase $7,58. Reduced 8,000, roads and transportation reduced 885,000. Same thing, it's money that we have in the secondary roads fund. Due to the timing of projects, we're writing the checks this year that should have been written last year if the projects were done then. So like I said, unless anybody has any specific question about the detail, that's where we're at. Our main operating fund is the general basic fund, and that fund balance is increasing with this budget amendment, which is a good thing.
In this budget, our mental health fund balance, we're still looking at, we're gonna be in the 20% range at the end of the fiscal year is your current
We are,
projection.
we are. And I didn't reduce the mental health budget when we increased the general basic budget for that move because of some other things that we weren't absolutely sure about. We paid the contribution to the region that we didn't have budgeted, so that's why you don't see a negative in mental health and a positive in the
Okay,
general
so
basic.
you just paid
fund.
that out of the mental health operating funds.
Yes, we paid that in mental health. Both halves have been paid now, so.
Yep.
So, the trust department that we still have, is that in Fund One?
Yes, it is
Still,
now. In Fund One, and the benefits are in Fund Two
Okay,
for those staff. Because it was basically staff and a few office supplies made up those programs.
okay,
Okay,
I'm good.
so we've been in a public hearing, anyone interested in commenting on the proposed amendments to the budget? If not, I would accept a motion to close the public hearing.
Move to close
Or-
public.
So, a motion by Santos and a second by Scott. Any further discussion? This is a roll call vote. Santos?
Aye.
I vote aye. Scott?
Aye.
And Doug? Okay. Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, discussion possible action to approve resolution 03-16-2003, amending the FY 19-20 budget.
Move to approve.
Have a motion by Scott,
Second.
second by Santos. Any discussion? This is a roll call vote. Scott?
Aye.
Santos?
Aye.
Doug? And I vote aye. Motion carries. Item B is resolution 03-16-2004, the FY 19-20 budget appropriations.
Move to approve.
Have a motion by Scott,
Second.
second by Santos. Any discussions? This is a roll call vote. Scott?
Aye.
Santos?
Aye.
Doug? And I vote aye. Motion carries. Item 6 is a public hearing on a loan agreement in principal amount not to exceed $750,000 for the purpose of financing expansion of the booking area at the Muscatine County Jail. So we are now in a public hearing. Anyone interested in commenting or on this project? If not, I
Move to close.
Okay, I have a motion by Santos, second by Scott. This is a roll call vote.
Aye.
Santos,
Aye.
Scott,
Aye.
Doug, and I vote aye. Motion carries. Item number 7 is a public hearing on a loan agreement in a principal amount not to exceed $600,000 for the purpose of financing insulation of the exterior walls in the Muscatine County Jail. So we're in a public hearing at this point.
Move to close.
We have a motion by Santos to close it. Second. Second by Scott. Any further discussion? It's a roll call vote. Santos?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
Doug? And I vote aye. Public hearing is now closed. Item number 8, public hearing on a loan agreement in a principal amount not to exceed $200,000 for the purpose of financing replacement of the hot water system at the Muscatine County Jail.
And I just wanna say, these are all things that were approved.
Part
as
of our capital
projects
budget
in the
project,
budget.
right.
This is a step we have to jump through in order to borrow the money after July 1.
Right. These are just setting up the financing of our capital project plan.
Move to close public hearing.
Second.
I have a motion by Santos, second by Scott. Any further discussion? This is a roll call vote. Santos?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
Doug? And I vote aye. Item number 9, a lot of public hearings today. Public hearing on a loan agreement in a principal amount not to exceed $450,000 for the purpose of financing roof replacements at the Muscatine County Attorney Building and update the facade of the Muscatine County Administration and County Attorney's buildings.
Move to close.
I have a motion by Santos, second by Scott. Any discussion? This is a roll call vote.
Aye.
Santos, Scott,
Aye.
Doug, and I vote aye. Item number 10 is discussion of possible action to approve resolution 03-16-2005 expressing intent to enter into loan agreements and providing for levy of taxes. I have a motion by Scott,
Second.
second by Santos. Any discussion? This is a roll call vote. Scott,
Aye.
Santos,
Aye.
Doug? And I vote aye. Motion carries. Item number 11, discussion regarding issues related to maintenance of trails in rural Muscatine County with County Engineer Keith White and Conservation Director Kurt Weiss. Good morning, gentlemen.
And this is something that actually the board directed that you would like on a future agenda. And this is the
Yeah.
date I could get the people in the room that we needed.
So I think that just I'll kick this off with a brief comment and then maybe we can have further discussion. So, as everybody's aware, there was a CAT grant done and so we have a trail now through the city of Muscatine all the way down to Deep Lakes Park. A good portion of that is in the road or some of it's in the city, some of it's in the county. And I think this is the long-term question here is, and I know we've heard some comments on the little, I don't really call it a trail, I call it the starts and stops partial trail under the bypass there on G28 that has issues now. And I think this is a discussion the board needs to have is these trails go out and I don't know whether how the funding happens and who sets it up, but ultimately who is responsible for these trails, how are they gonna be maintained so that we've invested taxpayer dollars to put these in and who's gonna be taking them. I know Kurt, I believe your staff, when they go through Discovery Park or in Deep Lakes, you've taken the maintenance within the park itself, correct?
That's correct. We've also taken the maintenance of that trail going from Kentstein Park, excuse me, down to Deep Lakes. As soon as it goes out of the county, into the county, we have taken the maintenance of that. Now, it's the maintenance. The city, and we still need to get a contract drawn up between the city, but theirs is already with DOT. It is the city's responsibility for long-term physical maintenance, if the trail goes bad, the city is liable for that, because they signed off on the grants. The county did not. We are just doing if you wanna say the daily maintenance. making
Debris
sure that-
removal,
right,
cleanup.
Making sure the edges are mowed in the summertime and those kind of things, but if the trail breaks up, it's the city's responsibility for that trail, because they're the grant holders on that.
And so I think the concern I have long-term is that if these trails, and I'm a big advocate and proponent of trails and all that, but I think that we also have to, like our secondary roads department and our conservation board, they have very specific tasks. And I think the board needs to think about as these trails are put in, how do they get funding long-term for the maintenance therein? Because conservation board, I'm assuming, got no additional funding to do that maintenance, Kurt, you're just doing it,
Yeah,
and figuring it out.
yeah,
And I know
It's not that
Keith has spoken to us about, you know, like the road, you know, secondary roads, we collect taxes for secondary roads. And we don't collect tax money. Keith gets no funding to maintain bike trails or walking trails. And it's probably a stretch to think that the rural county taxpayer should be funding all of that. And so I think we need to have a discussion about what do we do? I mean, what's our policy on it? I don't think we.
I just wanna throw out Iowa Code 331-429 under the home rule, tells you what you can spend the secondary road fund for. And it isn't trails. It tells you specific items that you can spend the secondary road fund. Can't spend it for trails, can't spend it for Special Olympics, can't spend it for zoning. So
Exactly.
It's pretty clear.
Yeah, yeah. So I think this is, you know, I know there's, you know, like the one, and I think Keith, you had even said like the one little section of trail, the county had no involvement, we never accepted it, you know.
No.
Is that in city limits or out of city limits?
Parts in the city, parts out.
Yeah.
Big bump is out.
The big bump is in the county,
Yep.
and so that's a trail that was built by some kind of a grant project, I'm sure, and there was no mechanism or way to maintain it.
A trail to nowhere.
Trail to nowhere. I didn't say that, you did.
I know it.
Okay. I mean, it's all good intentions, but I think that's, you know, a comment or something the board needs to think about. Do you have thoughts about it, Keith, or? Kurt?
Well, I mean, the city has been, my understanding, maintaining it, the county never did accept that. So, I think it was the city that was still, what little maintenance was done on it, now it has some major problems, you know. From the very beginning, it was never constructed correctly. I mean, we all saw that, and DOT designed it, because it was built with, you know, when they built the bypass, the overpass there, but, you know, it never had the under drainage like it should have had. There was water running across that trail all the time. You never design a trail that does that, because that's liability, you know, with the mud and that all going across.
So I know that I had attended that Trails Committee recently, and one of the comments that they had in regards to that specific trail going out, I think it's just south there of Lutheran Homes, they're just down on that G28, and they were pretty adamant knowing that was not installed well. They were kind of ashamed a little bit of knowing the way it was operational now, knowing that it doesn't really have a connection. It was not part of their trails /
Wasn't part of the plan.
Wasn't part of their plan. They knew that was a bad example. They had discussions in regards to this, because I'd mentioned to them, I said, there's going to be some concerns long term. Who maintains these trails? How do we determine, you know, those funds and where do they come from? And one of the discussion pieces that they had mentioned was potentially looking at saying, okay, could we have a maintenance fund that, you know, put away $2,000 per year long term over the 10 years. Now you have, you know, $20,000, and if you had major infrastructure replacements or something, you could do it on a 10 year. I mean, most of those trails ideally would not be going out if they're designed and installed correctly. You know, should be lasting on many terms at least 15, 20 years. They're asphalted well and installed correctly before they start major issues. The trail that they designed out to the deep lakes, I mean, that was installed, done well, a lot of design and a lot of work going into that one over by Lutheran Homes. I mean, it's like a 3-foot wide trail. It's not even the same. I don't think it's anything near design what would be in the same system, but I think that my perspective, I think this is something that we should request back to the city and look at of how do they propose that, even that Trails Committee, because they are, in a sense, you know, wanting to connect those trails further out into, you the county as well. I mean, I think
Right.
that is not a piece that they want to get away from. They want to look at ways of connecting them into more communities. It's just, and I think it adds value as well, but it's just, how do we fund that? That's a good question.
Who funds it and how do you fund it?
I
Haven't we had a request to extend something down further south?
There was a request to extend from Deep Lakes down to the Wisa County line. I brought that up to my board. At this
Yeah.
time, they're in agreement to put that kind of on hold because of all of our projects that we have at Deep Lakes Park. That's just not a top priority. It's something that probably will come up. There is probably some grant funding available, but it will be something that we'll have to discuss with you guys because there is gonna be long-term maintenance on that. You know, I mean, we have the one inside Discovery Park, which is used a lot, and that's been there now, getting on 20 years, but it's still, we've been maintaining it and doing the crack filling and all that, and I don't see any major problems in that for quite a while, but, the more we add, the more problems you're gonna see, and you're seeing it around the state, when I go to the statewide meetings, the majority, if not all the trails out in the county are maintained by the county conservation boards. And some of these counties have got 20, 30, 40 miles of trail, and now they're starting to get where they're having to replace, several miles a year, and that will have to be in the budget if we move that way.
So, I mean, do we have, I'm just thinking a little bit here, I don't know, do we have a policy on that, Kurt? Is that a conservation policy, is it a board policy? Because I know I've heard Keith say before about like just bike trails in general and where DOT's doing like, whether they do it on a shoulder and a share of the road and I think we all have reservations about all of that. I mean, most of Iowa's roads, in my opinion, are not designed for bikes and vehicles to share, and we've had a couple of deaths in this county, and that's not good. How do we, I mean, I don't know what the right path forward on it for this board is. I mean, does it be, if it's not part of the bi-state plan, that it's not a trail we would recognize and endorse? Does that become, do we need to have a policy like that? I mean, or does conservation, I mean, cause what I don't wanna see is somebody going out and getting a grant fund and building something, then all of a sudden we've got a headache long-term.
Well, bear in mind, whoever signs that grant application, and it's almost always federal dollars, you agree that you're going to maintain that trail. And like the one we were specifically talking about out there on G28, nobody from the county signed any grant application.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that was federal dollars. I'm 99% sure. That said, you sign, take that money, you agree you're gonna maintain it. And I think Kurt's telling me he's only got a couple places where they've signed this sort of agreements and they are maintained.
Discovery Park is the only place that we have $7 in on trails.
Would you, I mean, this might be a big ask, Kurt, but would you have any kind of idea, like, every mile of an asphalt trail costs me this much a year to maintain, every mile of like a stone trail? Cause I think this kinda gets into that, and I don't know what there was another trail over by West Liberty, was it the Hoover Trail or
Trail.
the Nature Trail, and I think that's a bit of a challenge too, maybe.
Yeah, and that's come before the Conservation Board several times, and each time the Conservation Board has rejected taking over management of that trail, and a lot, some comes from my recommendation, it's a gravel trail, again, very good intentions, but, kind of another trail that doesn't go anywhere at this time, and, gravel trails are high maintenance, and, and also, under state law right now, banded railroads, the ownership of that has 100% of the fencing responsibility. So, that's always something that's in the background, that we take that on, and then the landowners next to us say, well, we're gonna start running cattle or something, and we have to put up 100% of the fencing according to state law at this time. So, it's those kind of responsibilities that we just kind of backed off on and did not see the benefit to the people of Muscatine County. Hoover Nature Trail is owned by the Iowa Heritage Foundation, and so it's not gonna go back, you know, I mean, they're maintaining it, so it is still there for the public to use, it's just Muscatine County is not at this time.
Okay. Thoughts?
There's endless cost in that, what you're speaking of, everywhere from, just think about the brush clearing and the herbicide usage and the fencing potential
Yeah.
and the amount of,
Liability?
liability and skid steer and small dozer work that would take to, the list is endless.
Yeah, when they started that construction, and maybe 30 years ago or whatever, the Conservation Board at that time made a motion that they would accept the Hoover Nature Trail when it was fully completed. Well, it never did get fully completed, so that never really came back onto the Conservation Board then. But, you know, at that time, their intention was to have a paved trail through the county. And, you know, like a lot of these things, they run short on funding, so they kept it gravel. But I think probably a trail is gonna come into, you know, I mean, I sit on that trail committee too, there's a lot more trails that, you build the trails, they are being used. People are using them when you build them, and I think there's a lot more talk about some more trails in the city, and I think those would be good ones connected. Probably the major one in the county is gonna be the one going from Deep Lake Park down to Louisa County. Because Louisa County did get some funding to put a trail, but again, their trail in Louisa County is just a shoulder alongside the roadway. So it's not gonna be the type of trail we would be putting in, because I would be recommended, you know, separated from the road trail, to be family friendly, like what goes down to Deep Lakes right now. But I don't see the Conservation Board jumping into that anytime soon.
Well, they're expensive to build, to do
Oh,
them
yeah.
properly, and then you have the long-term maintenance issue.
So Kurt, you mentioned that you had gone to a lot of these state group meetings that you're having with other conservation directors as well, and their potential seeing a lot of upcoming costs and a lot of maintenance. Have you had discussions of where they're funding that, or are they just utilizing staff and it's coming right out of their maintenance budget?
It's coming out of the county's budget, you know, because there was some kind of hope when this the 3/8 of a cent sales tax, you know, the initial, proposal for that when it was, you know, recommended or passed by the public to go, that had some formulas in there for maintenance money for trails. That now has been eliminated, so, you know, that's always something that,
Yeah,
how are you gonna maintain these things once they're built? And it would have to come out of our general budget, our conservation board budget. Dubuque County has that, and I can get you those numbers from him probably.
Cost per.
Luckily, we're in a position that, you know, up there, they've got rolling terrain. He's having to replace bridges, so we know what bridges start costing.
oh, yeah.
Yeah, and they've got a 20-mile trail up there in Dubuque.
So I think it'd be important that we kind of have a strategy or something on that, so that it's clear that when people are looking at these, or, you know, part of me, I'm a little bit troubled when, you know, how the county, you know, because when you're talking to this board, you're talking about the county property taxpayer, and how, you know, these trails could benefit many other entities and people, and, you know, to me, it seems more like it ought to be a state-driven funding formula that really, from the state natural resource, or somehow, I mean, I support them, I think they're great, and I don't like, I support getting the trails off the roads, I like that too, it's just safer and better, but how do we make sure that, you know, the last thing you wanna do is put a trail out and get heavy use and not be able to take care of it too.
We need to be responsible when we're thinking about this, you know, and just not build them and then try to figure it out.
So can you potentially get us some estimated, you know, cost as far as maintenance? Say, hey, you know what, it's costing me, you know, $1,000 a month for, 4 hours of work or whatever it may come out being, how many hours you're putting in maintenance in regards to either materials and labor slash.
Yeah, I'll give you some of that. The manual labor is really not a big cost to us. I mean, we've already got people there, and to go,
Yeah.
like, the one going down to Deep Lake, he's not mowing that weekly, and it takes him a couple hours, and, that is really not the big cost. The big cost is when we start having damage to the surface, and that's where the cost is gonna be.
So my understanding, if I'm correct, right now, the only trails that we maintain are the Deep Lakes and Discovery Park?
That's correct, that's the only ones that the county conservation board maintains at this time.
So that's
We're only
5 miles or something?
Yeah,
Maybe?
probably in that range, yeah,
Okay.
and we're only responsible for the surfacing of the trail in Discovery Park. The one going down the Deep Lakes, it would be the city's responsibility because they are the grant holders of that one.
Yeah. I think it's a good piece that I can take back to the Trails Committee. We can have a discussion with them, and I think it's also something that we as a board can kind of look some estimated cost, and then we can start having a discussion of how we could fund that. I think it would be still long-term having some, I don't know, either some shared cost with the city or looking at, like you're saying, maybe something at the state level.
Yeah, I think if you can identify the problem and come up with some potential solutions, then we can start talking to we can talk to our legislatures, we can talk to anybody, I know that if you look at our transportation dollars, they're wanting to carve more and more off for trails and things like this, and I don't think they're thinking long-term about the maintenance costs and where
Yeah.
that's gonna come from, because to me, it'd be a shame to put in these nice amenities in the community and not think long-term about how you're gonna keep them there, and so they become active and used. Okay,
Okay.
so Kurt, you'll get us just some,
I'll give you, yeah.
yeah, I don't think there's an urgency on it, I think it's something we just the board wants to understand better and see how we can advocate for it.
And-
Okay,
I'll bring it up at that next Trails Committee.
yeah. All right, item number 12 is discussion of possible action to authorize the chair to sign a letter to the EIA, Eastern Iowa Mental Health and Disability Services Region. I'm seeking the authorization to send a letter to rescind our request to leave the Eastern Iowa Mental Health Region. This is, kind of we're at the direction, when I went out and met with the director, I think you all are pretty aware where we are in the process. If you look at our 2080, there's a timeline, I know others have said, well, you should just reapply. Well, there's a November 15th clock on that. There's actually precedent in the state for this. This has happened numerous times, and this came out of our conversation with the director and Teresa Anderson from DHS when I was out there a couple of weeks back. And so what I would like is the authorization by this board to send that letter to the chair and to the CEO of the region for their next business meeting, which has not yet been set, but should be in the next couple of weeks.
So basically, when we say we're sending a letter, we're just saying, hey, we're rescinding, we really didn't,
Right.
we didn't want to get out or initially, or how, explain to me that, how.
Well, it's just rescinding the request to remove ourselves from the region.
So that way we would automatically, in a sense, be back in
Yeah,
without
well,
even having to have a letter to go back in.
It's kind of and then Sherry will tell you is, we are still part of the 2080, we're still in the region, the 2080 has not been amended and changed, there's a process for doing that. It's still on file with the Secretary of State, still on file at Department of Management, and so that, is kind of when we set our budgets, it's all based on what we're allowed to do is based on those agreements that are out there. So, this makes sense in the process to do this so that we can go ahead and set our budgets, get everything going and move on, which will be, and I think if you'll see in the budget we certified was, it sets us at the 3076 rate per capita, that is the Eastern Iowa Mental Health Region rate on our budget.
Good, okay.
I would move to send the letter.
I have a motion by Scott,
I'll second it.
second by Santos. Any discussion? Henry? You can just say whatever you want, Henry.
Couple of things. One is, as I understand it, I mean, your earlier letter withdrawing it has been accepted by the Eastern Iowa Board. So the process would be that they would have to then, they'd have to rescind their acceptance of your previous withdrawal, correct?
Yeah, Henry, I think that's a real question as to what the actual process, the 28E is not clear about it. And so I think that will be, that was kind of my question to the director and her, their comment was, well, there's precedent on this, that basically if you rescind your request because they haven't actually done all the actions, the 28E has not been amended, has not been refiled, has not been put in. So you really are part of the region at this point. I think that'll be a discussion with the region board members.
Because I understand there's, and I guess, Jeff, you're going this afternoon, that there's a working group meeting?
It's the budget, trying to get we have to have the region budget set by April 1st. So the clock is ticking, so to speak. And so there is a working group meeting today at 3 o'clock in the Scott County boardroom.
Right, my understanding is that what the working group currently has is a 4, not a 5 county budget.
That is correct, the working group, but if you, the last budget that went out, there was a request by the board, at the last meeting to have Muscatine numbers prepared and included in the same format, and I believe that was submitted and Lori presented that in this working group packet as well. So it's really, fairly, I don't wanna say simple, but straightforward in that we already have that budget with the dollars that would include Muscatine County prepared in the format that they're using in the region. So it would be just a matter of adding the columns and putting it out. The bigger discussion is gonna be, on some of with the shortfall of funding in the region, what services we are going to be able to do and what we aren't. And I think, I don't remember if you were at the last meeting or not, Henry, but this whole administration and Robert Young Center and kind of what they're doing and all that will be probably a big discussion today.
Right, because there's a lot of, I mean, if they decided to re-accept Muscatine, there's a lot of work that has to get done then with the budgeting between now and July 1st. Because there has been, since we withdrew in November, they've been operating on the assumption that Muscatine County would be someplace else.
Right, yeah, so they have till April 1st to certify their budget to the Department of Management. So the region has that. Now, I do know that the CEO sent a note out yesterday and said she's requested for maybe an extension of time since with some of the COVID-19 and shutting things down, and I don't know where that'll go. I think it's the board's intention to have their budget ready by April 1st. And I think, I would expect that we'll have that discussion today in the working session as to what would the numbers look like. And I don't know if, and maybe Felicia, you know this, Julie Jetter, if she has spoken to, she's with the state, if she has spoken with Lori and what she's directed her to do or recommended she do or not.
I know that Julie has stated that she recommended to Lori that they include Muscatine in the FY21 budget. As it stands now, the budget that we got has FY20 figures in that are Muscatine. But we're
Right.
set up so that if we just need to plug our figures in, we can do that. The region would be fiscally extensively better off and have fewer cuts if they accept Muscatine back into the region.
Right. It would be, as all along, that Muscatine has been a net contributor to the region, and the region will be better off with us than without us, for sure. It's still, unfortunately, and you know, we can, the results of the legislation and other actions, you know, that the mental health is underfunded, system-wide, and I think that's something that the legislature continues to wrestle with, we continue to wrestle with, and this region is gonna have to wrestle with a little bit, because, you know, we've started a lot of services, and it looks like we're gonna have to taper them back, because we just can't raise the dollars we need to continue them forward. So that'll be, you know, that's part of the tough discussions going on, right now, at the region level. I think I don't know how, I think peer support was the last one, you know, the last budget we saw recommended by the management team. You know, we've spent about $500,000 a year, is that the rough number, on peer support services from a provider standpoint, and even Robert Young Center has said that this is bang for the buck, has been the most successful program we've implemented in the region, and it would be a shame to see us not be able to fund that forward. And I don't believe that's a core service, it's a core plus service, correct?
Correct.
And so that's part of that core plus conversation too, so. But I think there's a high desire by the region governing board to find a way to fund that, and that's part of the discussion today.
Well, we would wish you the best of success, and I think one of the things I know, Ed Askew mentioned this last week with a public comment. I mean, you have a lot of diplomacy you're going to have to do. Since November, there's been a lot of acrimonious statements made back and forth by both groups, and I know particularly the November meeting of the SEAL board, where, you know, which was produced by Ed's FOIA request. I mean, there were some fairly harsh comments that Mr. Mather made about the Eastern Iowa district at that meeting, which is now part of, you know, the public record. So I would just suggest that you do have, whatever happens with that board, that you do have to put forward a considerable amount of diplomacy to smooth over the last few months of discussions.
Thank you. Okay, so we left that at this, did we vote on that?
You did not.
just
We did not
okay,
vote
we
yet.
I have a motion and a second. Okay, any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same? Motion carries. Okay, item number 13 is a canvass, a tier 2 canvass of the West Liberty Revenue Purpose Statement Special Election held on March 3rd, 2020. Could you make that more of a tongue twister for me?
Yes, the election, as we canvassed last week, we canvassed our portion and the portion that we did for Johnson County that we ran through Muscatine County. And since now we have been given the results for Cedar County, which were 2 voters, 2 yes, 0 no, no overvotes, no undervotes, so we've added those to our results, which means the final results for this special election are 72 yes, 10 no, 0 overvotes, 0 undervotes, and the public measure A is adopted.
I'll move to approve as presented.
We don't need to do anything, we just,
Oh.
thank you. It's just read into the minutes.
I was reading into the next West Liberty bill,
Yeah,
sorry.
okay. Discussion of possible action authorizing the chair to sign a statement of election costs for the March 3rd, 2020 West Liberty Revenues Purpose Statement Special Election.
Just so you know, that is the cost to Muscatine, for Muscatine County, that we would be billing them the $2,861.47. I do know that Cedar County has also sent them a bill for their portion that's somewhere around $500.
Okay,
So I'll move to approve.
so I have a motion by Santos and a second by Scott. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carries. Item number 15, discussion of possible action to approve the minutes of the Monday, March 9th, 2020 regular meeting.
Move to approve.
I have a motion by Santos,
Second.
second by Scott. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, the same. Motion carries. Item number 16, discussion possible action to document an amendment to the March 6th, 2020 minutes to reflect that the eligibility support specialist position, grade 9, was approved and the current employee was placed at grade 9, step 7.
That's the March 9th minute.
You know, when I talked to you guys about this last week, the paperwork in front of you was correct, but when I spoke to you, I said 7 and 8 instead of 8 and 9. So in order for the minutes to reflect what was said in the meeting and televised in the meeting, what I'm asking you to do is note an amendment to those minutes in this week's meeting.
Yep, so the document we received and we made our decisions on was correct.
Correct,
It's
yes.
just what the verbiage was wrong, and we're gonna get it in the minutes that we understand that. So I have a motion by Scott. Second by Doug. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carries. Correspondence, Santos?
I had several different emails that I think most of you guys got from the Special Olympics. I also got a email from Jason, and I had a meeting with Brett in regards to what their funding are, where it goes, and I shared with you guys as well. I had another email also from county resident in regards to the county and city moving forward on the drainage concerns that I forwarded to you as well. That's all I have.
Okay. Correspondence, I had 2 letters on Special Olympics myself. That's it.
I had several emails, is all I had myself.
And emails on Special Olympics. Wednesday, the 11th, I got a call from Elsie Paul. There was a lot of locates in front of her house, and she was concerned. I called out to engineering, talked to Christie, and she found the permit, and it was her neighbor that called in the permit, so. Got that settled, and then she asked for copies of the power line agreement. And I believe Eric was at that meeting.
Is that process coming, they've got, I think you said they've got agreements done and they're starting to go out?
I got another item.
Okay.
I did have another correspondence as well. I talked to Jim, he gave me a call about the ditch work in front of his house. I wanted to know when we were gonna address that.
Okay.
I don't remember what day that was, you know.
They all run together.
Give me a date on that.
Okay.
And that's it.
How about committee reports, Doug?
Wednesday the 4th, we had a safety committee.
Scott?
The only committee I had was on Monday the 9th, we had a magic meeting, that was it.
I had a regional workforce investment board meeting on the 11th. That was it for me last week. Santos?
I had a exec board meeting on the 11th with We Lead, and then on Friday I had a directors meeting on the 13th with We Lead as well too. That's all
Okay.
I had.
Number 19 is receive information from county employees.
I have something.
Oh, you have something? Liz?
Yeah, just real quick. I don't know if you've noticed the banners.
Oh, yes.
Over here, those were, and I think they're gonna put them up on the camera here as soon as he manages to get the camera over there, so that the public can see them, but those were, given to the county by the Iowa Secretary of State. And, I guess he's not gonna be able to get them, he had them on earlier, guess he can't get them over there, but those banners were given to us by the Iowa Secretary of State. They're easily transportable and available for groups to display at events such as voter registration drives, temporary displays, say at libraries, etc. Any interested groups can just contact the auditor's office and request to use the banners, and we'll check them out to them. And they do have them kind of up there on the screen now, so they can see them. In the meantime, we're going to, Nancy and I have figured out a spot to put them in our front windows over here in our foyer, pointing out for the street so people can see them as they go by and stuff, or walk by and that sort of thing. But we're gonna have these this year. This is to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the women's right to vote this year. And so we're, have these available for any group that might be interested in using them at one of their events.
Yeah, I noticed those this morning when I came in. They're very, very nice,
Very
very
nice,
professionally
yeah.
done, very informative, and
Yeah.
it's
So
awesome to
they
have
can-
that
They can
resource.
borrow one or both or
Yeah.
whatever they wanna do,
So-
but,
So they
might-
just contact the
all
auditor's
they have to do
office
is
if they
contact the auditor's
have a group or an
office
event
and-
they'd
yeah.
like to have those
Yeah.
at.
Yeah.
Great.
Awesome, great.
Thank you, Leslie. Eric, did you have something?
Just to follow up on Doug's comments, I did attend another meeting of a group of landowners on the transmission line project with Power and Water. And just full disclosure, at this point, I've kind of been attending on behalf of assisting my in-laws who are landowners that are affected by this project too, but also kind of just keeping an eye on the progress. I know you were interested early on when there was a lot of confusion, a lot of frustration. So kind of been wearing two hats as I go there, but I just wanted to be fully transparent on that. I think things are getting worked out. I do really want to personally commend Power and Water to try to clean up that frustration from the front end. They have worked very hard to address the concerns of a lot of the property owners there, and I think most of the owners are very much on board with now the way things are being put forward as far as wording in the legal documents, addressing the concerns of crop damage, compaction, scheduling, notification. I think it's gonna be moving forward here pretty quickly. They'll be reaching out to the broader area of the project. This is, the last few weeks have been meeting with a select group of property owners or their representatives who have had a lot of the particular questions and concern on crops and that type of thing. So looking good, and again, Power and Water's done a good job to take a big step forward from the way the project started.
When do they foresee that starting?
I don't know that they have a set in stone schedule yet, because they have to get all the property owners to sign on and at least agree initially. Then they can go, I believe, to the utilities board and get formal project approval, finish their surveying. It all depends on getting the agreement on a route and then, some more surveying, so they can take the completed and engineered project for approval. So,
When they do that, is that all gonna be directionally bored?
no, these are overhead power lines.
Oh,
Now, they are going to run some underground to, on a certain section, there was gonna be the transmission lines, and then an underbuild of current distribution lines that were on the other side of the road, so they were gonna combine those, all into one on the big lines. But they're gonna go ahead and run some of those working with REC underground, so it will just be the high voltage transmission lines.
okay.
But most of this project entails new poles and, transmission lines overhead. That's been discussions too with these property owners, crop spraying, cause the way it cuts across, those type of things, how will that affect fields, but.
Yeah, I think that I was really pleased to see that MPW, after the initial kind of meeting, really kind of pulled together some local resources and sat down with landowners and just worked through the issues outside of the kind of normal process, which I think went much better in the end. And I know Doug worked hard to help with that as well. So I appreciate, Eric, your efforts and Doug's to get that done, and the landowners for, speaking up and being involved and being willing to work with MPW as they tried to get through this. I think it'll be a great project for the community and the area, and hopefully everybody will come out doing fine.
And I just have one other item. A couple weeks ago, I briefed you on a couple of bills that went through the House and the Senate that were of particular concern to zoning officials across the state. The House File 2512 and House File 2477. They did pass the House and the Senate. Our group has been working hard to try to get the governor's ear to slow it down a little bit. I won't go through again all of our concerns. I think you are well versed. There is some indication that she's considering vetoing, or at least allowing the period of time to expire, which she has to sign those. She met with some of our membership, I believe last week, and I have registered my concerns on the governor's website. I'm gonna send you guys the link if you think it's worth your time or that's still where you're at. I would like to encourage you to reach out to her, say, hey, I think there's a better way to do this, that this has unintended consequences, So I'll send you guys that link, how you can send an email that registers or some correspondence with the governor on these two bills.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Eric.
Anything else, Keith? You have- Okay. Item 20 are items with the administration office. Nancy?
I don't have anything.
I would just say, and I don't know if the other board members, and I failed to mention in the correspondence, you saw that note from Mike Nolan on the project. I mean, I don't know what your thought, I don't think there's any reason to slow that project right now. I mean, the last notes I've had from Public Health and Brian is, you know, COVID-19 is out there, but really that project would be a low risk, low impact situation. And, you know, Mike personally, you know, I think we could kind of work through the issues there that he might have getting over here and communicating with the board, but I personally don't see any reason to slow anything on that project. For you?
No, I think I don't see any concerns with that as well either. I think they're working in safe distances, and I think everybody knows the concerns around what you would have or what to look for COVID-19, and so I have no.
Yeah, I think the guidance from the state has been, you know, avoid groups of 50 or more, practice social distancing, stay 6 feet apart-ish when you're in large groups, and if you're sick, please stay home and don't spread it. And I think if we all do that and act responsibly, we'll be fine, so.
Yeah.
Very good, okay. So I'll reach out maybe to Mike Dancy on that too,
Okay.
and just say we don't see any reason to get too worked up right now. Okay, anything else? Any other board members have anything for the good of the whole? If not, meeting is adjourned.